truth for the battered but proud people of the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hey guys, welcome to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and we are here live in the WYSL studio. And of course, as always, I've got Bob Savage with me.
Everybody, Doc, here comes another week.
Here it comes. And, well, you know, the weather's looking pretty good, so hopefully it stays that way.
We're going to get some nice summer weather this week.
Yeah, this weekend was awesome.
Like motorcycle riding weather, one might say.
Yep, I did some of that. Hopefully do some more later. So today is going to be a controversial topic, as promised. We're going to talk about vaccines today. And that seems to be rather controversial lately. I've had a lot of requests on Facebook, people sending me emails saying, hey, we really want to know, what are your thoughts on vaccines? What are your thoughts on New York State's new law eliminating religious exemptions for vaccines, and a whole slew of questions. So I wanted to make sure I answered those questions for you guys, gave you my opinions, some background, all of that. So brief outline of what today's show is hopefully going to cover. I'm going to start with a few highlights in vaccine history, just to give you guys a little background. I'm going to talk about some stuff with vaccines that has so far been proven to not be true versus what has been proven to be true. Then we're going to talk about vaccines on a national level, and then we will finish out talking about what's going on in New York State with this New York State bill. So kind of a loose outline there for you guys today. But before we dive into this, I want to encourage you guys to head over to patreon.com/RFNY. We're trying to expand the show to 5 days. You guys are asking for 5 days. I'd love to give you 5 days. Help me raise the money to get there. If you go to patreon.com/RFNY, you can sign up at various levels of support, help us grow the show. The other thing you're going to start getting with that starting this month is we're going to put up some exclusive content on Patreon. So you'll only be able to see it if you're supporting us on Patreon. One of those will be an interview I did recently in Siena College. I went down there. We did an interview about the Second Amendment. They're doing a, what do they call it? Summer of Rights, I think is what they're called. So I came down to talk about the Second Amendment. That video is nowhere right now, except for on my hard drive.
Really?
It's going on Patreon. So if you're a Patreon supporter and you want to hear an hour of me talking about the Second Amendment with college students from Siena College, the way you can see that is by heading over to Patreon. They'll be up probably, maybe I'll put it up right on 4th of July. That seems like a fitting time to put that up there.
Oh, so that didn't get pulled down by some social media platform?
No. When we went there, we brought the equipment, we recorded it. It just hasn't been published anywhere yet.
Oh, okay, all right.
So, they didn't take it down or
well, it's
anything.
the icky Second Amendment stuff. That's about guns.
Yeah. No, it went very well. It was very good. I of course want to welcome a whole bunch of you guys to the show. Yolana, Michelle, Nathan, Barbara, Laura, Dan, Carrie, Jay, and George. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, all of our listeners on YouTube, Twitter, and the WYSL stations, thank you for joining us. So let me just kick it off here. I'm just going to give you a few highlights in vaccine history first. I love giving you guys some background knowledge, stuff that people don't typically talk about. So I went through and found there are records of vaccinations in the early 1500s. The Chinese were doing them. They were vaccinating for smallpox. And the way they did it was absolutely disgusting. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's pretty.
Are you going to creep me out today? Because I don't like needles.
You don't like needles. Yeah. No, actually, they did not use needles.
Yeah. So I've heard of worse things.
It may be worse. So what they did is they, Bob, close your ears. They took the scabs off of the smallpox, ground them up, and then had children snort them. So that I don't know. That just sounds really disgusting.
Okie dokie.
Somebody else's, but that was like one of the first forms of vaccinations that was happening. Things have progressed.
I'd heard of vaccines where they would take a piece of broken glass, like a shard of broken glass, and they would stick it in this beaker of whatever the serum was, and then they would scratch the surface of your skin with it.
Interesting. Yeah. There was a lot of stuff out there, and unfortunately with the internet, there's so much that conflicting information that there's a lot of stuff I don't get to talk about on air because I don't want to put my name on something I don't know if it's true or not, because there was some other stuff I read that I was like, I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm just not going to bring it up. But if
you hear a loud thump during this program, ladies and gentlemen, it'll just be me hitting the floor, and then Andrew will have to continue on his own.
Yep. So that was interesting. That was kind of the beginning. In 1813, in the United States, under James Madison, the United States Vaccine Agency was created. So vaccines had their own official agency starting in 1813. By 1855, Massachusetts was the first state to require students to be vaccinated before going to public schools. Now, there was only one vaccine at the time. It was a smallpox vaccine.
Can I say that year again?
1855. So 1855, Massachusetts was the first state to pass legislation requiring students to be vaccinated. Around that time, Germany was I think 1878. Britain was 1853. A bunch of other European countries. They all seem to be in that like 20-year period where people started making it mandatory for public education. But at that time, it was really just smallpox. I see George's comment about the Chinese way there. He just says yuck and giant capital letters here. After 1855, other states began to follow. So there's an interesting time in our vaccine history, and this is actually a global thing. Was 1998. You have any idea what happened in 1998?
Spanish-American War?
Nope. 1998.
Oh, 1988.
Yeah.
Okay, 1888. Nope. 1998. What was that? The bird flu or something?
So in 1998, a guy he wasn't listed as a doctor. I'm not sure if he was or not. I don't know if he was like stripped of his title or something, but Andrew Wakefield and it seems 11 other colleagues, they published a hypothesis that the MMR, which is the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, caused autism. This is one of the things that really started the anti-vaccine movement. Mm-hmm. Up until that point, there wasn't, I mean, there was some question of if vaccines were safe or not. There was, a good portion of people who were opting out still. But when this hypothesis came out,
the opt-outs went through the roof, right?
Yeah. So it's pretty crazy what happened here. And it's crazy that it started as just a hypothesis that was published. So there wasn't actually any proof put together. It was just a hypothesis.
But it came from somewhere. I mean, they didn't just like wake up one day and say, hey, let's publish an article about MMR.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely. So it came from some stuff. He ultimately did a study in conjoined with this that proved, and I'm going to say with air quotes for those who are listening on the radio, because we'll address this this piece later, that the MMR vaccine did in fact cause autism, according to his study. And the problem with this is they only did the study with 12 children. So
that's a tiny sample.
So the sample size already was way off. The other issue at this time was autism was just becoming readily diagnosed in 1948 through the 60s. And I think it was 61 where they came up with the actual spectrum test to see if people had autism. So interestingly enough, the MMR vaccine didn't actually come out till 71. But as they're testing these children, they're like, oh, look, autism's prominent now. This vaccine's prominent now. It must be that these two are correlated. So I think that's where the hypothesis came from.
That's the old wet streets cause rain hypothesis.
Yes, absolutely. So obviously there was a huge concern because in 2001, he actually published a study saying that, yes, in fact, the two are linked at high percentages, and scared the crap out of people. So when we come back here on Radio Free New York, I'm going to tell you what ended up happening with this study. It's really important, and the ramifications for us today and moving forward here on Radio Free New York.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. WYSL. AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Avon Gun and Hunting Supply, a locally owned and operated gun shop specializing in pre-owned firearms and repairs. Get your rifle, shotgun, or pistol serviced and tuned before you take it to the field. Open daily. Avon Gun, East Main Street, between the Bank of Castile and Charlotte's Web of Odds and Ends.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL. AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. I see you guys are commenting all over in the feed. The feed's going crazy today. That's great. I love it.
Wonder why.
Yep. So for those of you joining the show right now, we're talking about vaccines. We're talking a little bit about the history of vaccines, a couple key dates in history. Ultimately, by the end of the show, we're going to talk about New York State's removal of religious exemptions for vaccines in New York. But before we do that, we're going to wrap up the history. We're going to talk about some science-y stuff a little bit, and then vaccines on the federal level. We'll finish out with New York State. So what we left off with is this guy named Andrew Wakefield, who published a hypothesis and then a few years later a study linking the MMR vaccine to autism. Well, turns out After his test was published, it was published with him and 11 other colleagues who put this together, did this research, and published it. 10 of the 12 co-authors almost immediately retracted the paper. And the reason is it became public that the method that they were using was a sample size of 12 children, which is not enough at all to do any type of real analysis on the worldwide population, definitely not the United States population in 1998 and 2001. Then what happened after that is maybe a little more embarrassing for them, and that is that all of their research was funded by attorneys who had been hired by parents in lawsuits against vaccine companies. So what came out is kind of this, I don't know that you'd call it a conspiracy, but basically the attorneys were looking for somebody to create research that they could use in court, basically, for these lawsuits is what came out. And then ultimately what came out later was that since they couldn't find a link, they actually committed fraud by hand choosing the data that they were going to publish.
This was found in a court of law that they actually had.
I think it was
cooked
found
the books on this
through peer review or some. It was really weird how it was worded, because they said that what was the exact words that they used? They used a word that was that basically he wasn't prosecuted for it. But it seemed as if, I don't know, it's on the, let me find the website here. It's on the National Health Institute.gov website.
See, now there's that can be tricky as well, because lots of times there's, drug company participation in a lot of federal studies. So they would have an incentive to make sure the vaccine gets ruled to be hunky-dory.
Yeah.
So I have to get back to the initial question that this whole issue poses. Is there any scientific evidence for the fact that these vaccines do cause autism? Or is it just this one highly flawed, tiny study?
Yeah. So, and that's actually what it comes down to is so far there hasn't been anything besides this study. Numerous scientific bodies have tried to reproduce it.
Yeah.
None of them have. None of them have been able to date. So as of today, in 2019, there's no studies that I'm aware of that have actually followed a scientific peer-reviewed study that have proven any link whatsoever. Now, that
seems like there's a dearth of that, if anything, if what you're telling me is the case. Now, again, this is just the MMR vaccine we're talking about.
That was specifically this one. And in February of 2010, basically all of Wakefield's work in regards to this study linking MMR to autism were totally retracted from all the medical publications and everything like that.
And nothing has supplanted that.
Nothing.
There's no more
date.
recent.
Nothing.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, so This would appear, at least at this stage, to be a closed case.
It does to me. Now I'm sure there's going to be people out there that say that the vaccine companies and big pharma paid to make it that way. I'm not in a position to.
They can't pay off everybody. Nobody's going to come.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to come forward with any information that makes Wakefield's case for him.
Yeah. I don't know. So I say all of that to say that this study. So the year after this study, 1998, when this came out in England, they didn't have the numbers for the United States, but they did for England. Vaccinations dropped 80 to 90%. Because people were terrified to give them to their children. So that's the history piece. I wanted to give you guys all this history because I see people talk about this a lot. There's a few other kind of debunked things that are probably worth talking about. One is that vaccines are totally effective. They're not. I'll tell you where the source is for that. And the other is they're totally ineffective. Well, that's not true either. If you think one way or another, neither of those are true. The World Health Organization, which sounds really globalistic and kind of scary, but they're the ones that work on these vaccines. They
tend to be politically leftist.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. they say that none of the vaccines are totally effective right out of the gate. So they're the ones.
Well, I think we know that, don't we?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. So they cite that they aim for, as a part of like approval for vaccines, an 85 to 90% success rate. So if you get a vaccine, on average, it's supposed to be 85 to 90% effective. However, some are more. Measles, for example, they cite as being 98% effective. And then we know of others that are way less, like the flu. There's years that they say the flu shot is anywhere from 30 to 60% effective.
There's a good reason for that, though. That's because of the constantly mutating nature of the flu virus.
Yep.
That's not that. Now, when you say that was the measles? Is that what you just referred to? Yep. So now, is that part of MMR, or is that an individual vaccine for measles?
So they only cited measles. They did not cite MMR.
Not the same thing.
So that might be the strain that goes in the MMR. But I don't think they're referring to the entire MMR vaccine.
I'm just wondering, as we have this conversation, if for those who might want to err on the side of caution, is there still individual vaccine available for mumps, measles, and rubella? That your kid gets stuck 3 times instead of 1. But is that a safer way to go? Because this is a vaccine that has a better track record.
Yeah.
Although MMR is dates to 1971?
71, yeah. So I'm thinking no.
Hardly a new thing.
Yeah. I don't think that you could get them separated out, but that's a good question for a doctor or a pediatrician. My guess is the manufacturers probably haven't made them separate in a long time. So I wanted to talk about that, but I wanted to talk about the flip side, because sometimes I hear people say on social media, vaccines are totally safe. You should have no fear of using them. And that's not necessarily true either. If you go to the CDC website under vaccine safety, you can actually click under specific vaccines. You can click through chicken pox, Hep A, Hep B, some of these things that I cannot pronounce whatsoever, and they'll actually put right there common side effects. DTaP, for example, soreness or swelling where the shot was given. Well, that seems pretty standard. I think that's under every single vaccine here.
That's right.
Fever is another one that seems to be under all of them, but it doesn't appear to be life-threatening. Irritability, feeling tired, loss of appetite, and vomiting. Oh, well, those don't sound so great.
The view makes me do all those things.
Yeah. And then it goes on: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach ache. So to say that these are totally safe is not true. You're still potentially could have side effects. They don't appear to be life-threatening. There have been documented cases where people have had adverse reactions, life-threatening reactions to vaccines, though. Everybody's body is different. There is a small percentage of the population that does go through this. And to say that doesn't happen wouldn't be true either, because it does. It's just a very small scale. So when people say vaccines are safe, they could say generally safe, mostly safe. To say totally safe, you shouldn't be scared. Every single state in the United States, including New York State, still has a medical exemption where if your body isn't right for a vaccine, they will exempt you. So I think that's
not for measles anymore in New York.
No, they kept the medical exemption. They eliminated the religious exemption. Yeah, so that's the one differentiator that I did check as of this morning. There is not a single state in the United States that if you have a risk factor for your health, that you're required to get a vaccine. So the fact that that's the case really tells you that, there are risk factors involved, and you should be aware of them before you vaccinate yourself or your child. The last item I want to hit on things that can have a misconception is I often see people say something like, well, if everybody else's kid is vaccinated, it shouldn't matter if my child's vaccinated or not. And I get that, because theoretically, if vaccines were 100% effective and every other child was vaccinated, theoretically, that could be true. But realistically, it's not, because like we talked about, some vaccines, 98%, others 30 or 60%, which means, out of 10 kids that actually get that, maybe only 3 are actually immune. So it's the idea of building up what they call herd immunity. Check it out on Wikipedia or something like that. Guys, we're going to take another break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about vaccine policies on a national level on Radio Free New York.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. WYSL. AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Avon Gun and Hunting Supply, a locally owned and operated gun shop specializing in pre-owned firearms and repairs. Get your rifle, shotgun, or pistol serviced and tuned before you take it to the field. Open daily. Avon Gun, East Main Street, between the Bank of Castile and Charlotte's Web of Odds and Ends.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL. AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and you guys are going wild in the comments here. So some things I want to address because there's a whole lot going on here in the comments. First thing is, should vaccine companies be liable for the vaccines they produce and the side effects that those vaccines give? I would say yes, but there's going to be some situations where maybe your primary care provider should also be liable. And here's why. And they actually, I know somebody mentioned that they're not liable, but I'm aware of a few cases where the vaccine companies have paid out and compensated families for medical issues. It's my understanding that each vaccine manufacturer has literally millions and millions of dollars set aside for payouts to people who are actually medically injured by their vaccines. I don't know if that's something they do themselves to keep from lawsuits.
There's a federally administered fund that administers settlements. It's kind of like it's analogous to the workers' comp kind of thing. Where there's a limitation of liability, but the drug companies and medical practitioners have to pay into this fund.
Yeah.
So there is a statistical
like an insurance fund.
Exactly.
Or something.
Yeah. Because there is a statistical, inevitability that there's going to be some adverse effects from some of these vaccines, but the overall positives from the vaccines outweigh
sure.
the isolated cases. But that doesn't mean the isolated cases should go uncompensated.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say. Absolutely.
I looked that up for you.
They should. Yeah, that'd be great. I would say absolutely. They should be responsible for the product they create, how they market it, how they push it. At the same time, your primary care professional, your doctor who's administering it, should be fully transparent before they give it to you. I don't think it just stops at the vaccine manufacturers. Your primary care professional is supposed to be the person that gives you advice about your health. They're the person that is supposed to say, hey, you have a risk factor here. You are paying me to maintain your health. This could be bad for you. What your doctor shouldn't be doing is just mass vaccinating people because they can bill for it. So two levels of liability there.
National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, VICP, is a federal no-fault system designed to compensate individuals or families of individuals who've been injured by childhood vaccines, whether administered in the private or the public sector. And you can find out more about this at benefits.gov. I guess you can, or you can just Google that.
Yeah.
And so it's in very rare cases, a vaccine can cause a serious problem, such as a severe allergic reaction. In these instances, the VICP provides financial compensation. So you file a petition. And
so it's kind of like unemployment, basically.
And there are vaccine attorneys out there, too, by the way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm sure there are. So I wanted to cover that. And yes, of course, I would be Jay comments, kind of like the sex abuse fund Congress has. Well, there you go.
Oh, that's a chortle right there.
Yeah. So my thought is, yes, the vaccine manufacturers should absolutely be liable for what they create. But once again, they're not the ones administering it. I think liability should also lie on the primary care professional who is pushing you to have this, who may or may not be fully transparent about the risks. So that's the first thing that I wanted to address. Holy crap! There's 83 comments in here. I can't find the other ones. So I did at least want to cover that because
you pushed a button today.
Yeah. In no way are we saying like, oh, we should be protecting the vaccine manufacturers. No, we're talking about transparency here, regulation, and also the history of what's going on. I mean, tomorrow a study could come out finding certain vaccines totally detrimental to your health and linked to things. We're just going based off of the information we have today, trying to prevent disinformation from spreading around. So with that being said, what's interesting is I think the federal government actually did something right here, which is something I don't get to say too often. And that is because, isn't that funny? I don't get to say that too often. There are no federal laws that mandate vaccines, not a single one. And this is exactly how the federal government was meant to be. The federal government should be, its purpose is to protect your rights, not regulate your life. So there are 0 federal laws that mandate the use of vaccines. All of the vaccine laws are actually state specific. So going state to state, you will actually have different mandatory laws based on the state you're in. Sometimes local municipalities even have their own specific laws. So kudos to the federal government by not overreaching in this one very specific instance, allowing the states to do their own thing here. So that's a good thing. The interesting thing is, and I'm going to pull up a little map for you guys to see this, that there are various exemptions state by state in terms of what is required, what's not. Now, the CDC gives a recommended vaccine schedule. We'll look at that in a minute. But what you have is you have 15 states currently, as of this morning, that allow for non-religious exemptions. They call them personal belief exemptions or philosophical exemptions. Those states are Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arkansas, Louisiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Now, I did already, because I'm sure somebody's going to ask this, I tried to find the research to see if these states that allow you basically to opt out for personal reasons, if they have higher rates of sickness. I could not find that information. It may be out there. I wasn't sure where to look. I usually go to CDC for most of my information. Couldn't find it, so I don't know if that's true or not. Then there are 45 states that allow for religious exemption. The only 5 that don't are California, Mississippi, West Virginia, Maine, and of course, now New York State. Yeah. So,
but again, that's just for measles, though, right? So far.
No, this is based on not for measles. This is the mandatory schedule that the state creates for accessing public school. So, yeah, and that's the thing that I want to say is I don't actually know what the requirements are in each state because they're all different. I'll just know, what New York State has. And that's really the next thing to talk about here is this bill for removing religious exemptions in New York State. Because I don't know how many people had the opportunity to read the bill. And I'm not in favor of this bill by any means. And actually, we'll talk in the last segment of the show, my personal beliefs, because I know a lot of people are saying, well, what do you think? How do you feel about this? We'll cover this in the end. But the bill in New York State, there doesn't appear to be, based on what I read, an actual mandatory requirement for you to vaccinate your children in New York State. It only becomes a requirement if you're going to send them to public school, for them to have access to public school. So I think that's.
But if
really
you don't have your
important.
kids in school, they'll take your kids away from you.
Well, you could do private school. You could do homeschool. There are some options. I'm not saying they're affordable. I'm not saying they're right for everybody. I'm just saying based on how I'm reading this law, and you're right. You could be found in neglect and CPS and a whole bunch of other stuff too. So it's certainly not like I said, I'm not defending it. Just talking about the words that are in it. It appears based on what I'm reading in this bill that vaccines only apply to you and your family if you will send them to public schools. So that I just wanted to get out there, and it actually lists very specifically what vaccines you have to have. So I will try to read them for you guys. Poliomyelitis.
Yeah, polio.
Polio. Oh, okay. Yep. That must be why we call it polio, because it's way easier to say polio.
Shorthand version.
Yep. Mumps, measles, diphtheria, rubella. Diphtheria, rubella. Oh, here's another one. Varicella, I think.
I don't know what that is.
Hepatitis B, pertussis, tetanus. Tetanus?
Yeah, tetanus.
Tetanus. And where applicable, so this must now go to probably, my guess is municipal rulings. Hemophilus influenzae type B, HIB. Meningococcal disease.
Oh, varicella is chickenpox.
Okay. There you go. And pneumococcal disease.
Pneumococcal, yeah.
Yep.
Pneumonia.
So those are the ones that fall under this bill. Anything else doesn't actually fall under this bill, which is also, good to know that there's certain ones that do, certain ones that don't. Once again, it applies specifically to public school. And I will share with you guys real quick. I'm just going to pull up on the screen the schedule from birth to looks like 6 years old that the CDC recommends for people. So it looks like multiple Hep Vs up until 18 months, looks like 3 of them. Then 3 rotaviruses, 5 total for DTaP. The HIB is 4, PCV 13. I don't know which one that is. That I wonder if that's the pneumococcal virus. Then IPV 3, influenza yearly, MMR twice, varicella twice, and Hep A once.
That's a lot of vaccines.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot less than I remember, though. And I couldn't find, so that was one of the things I wanted to see.
But that's the CDC recommendations, right?
Yeah, so each
state is going to they're going to layer their own on top of that.
Exactly. So who knows what the I'm sure actually if I looked, I could have found the New York State scheduled one and compare it to like a Pennsylvania or an Ohio one to see where the differences are. But it's important for you to know that not all the vaccines are mandatory for public schools, and they're not mandatory per se unless you're sending your kids to public schools. So when we come back, the next piece of the show is going to be, what do I think about this, and how should we fix it? Shouldn't we fix it? How can we fix it? We're going to talk about that next on Radio Free New York.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
A classic amusement park, a modern water park, 2 great parks, 1 great price. Plus, get special savings when you buy online. Ride the Jackrabbit, splash in the wave pool, play the games, and enjoy your sugar waffle. Summertime family fun doesn't get any better than this. There's so much fun, so close to home.
Seabreeze, come get your summer at Seabreeze.
Get park info at seabreeze.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest
last spot
that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when
Joanna texted me her guest canceled, so she's going to run a best of.
Achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We're talking about vaccines. We're talking about the New York State vaccine law that eliminates religious exemptions. And somebody mentioned in the comments that the bill actually is not just public schools, it's private schools and daycares as well. So
yeah, I thought it was more than just public.
So yeah,
and there's talk about expanding it to homeschooling too.
Yeah, so here I actually pulled up the bill. I read through the bill, and I think the confusion on my end was it talks about public health law and then schools. I was thinking it was just public schools, but it actually just says school. So it doesn't denote public school. It does not denote private school. I don't know if daycares are considered school under the law, but there's no mention of daycare in here or childcare or anything like that. That's not to say that it's not defined somewhere else in the law as being a school. So if it is, then it would. The law is only about 43 lines. I take that back. It is 62 lines. So it's pretty short.
Yeah.
And really, all it does is it takes the existing law, literally adds less than a paragraph, and crosses out about 10 words. So it's not a major change in terms of anything other than religious exemption. That is really the only change. So if you were not claiming religious exemption before, you now don't have the ability to do so. Once again, I'm not talking in support of this law. I just want to make sure that everybody understands, as they're talking about with friends and family, that we're talking about the same thing with the right information. And we make mistakes just like I did. I misread it right there live on the radio. So it does happen. I want to talk a little bit about the morality of forcing people to inject themselves with something, because I think that this is where probably a lot of people are upset. And I would have to say that it's a pretty complex topic, because you should have the right to decide what goes into your body. Under no circumstances should anybody, come to you and say, you will put this in your body, you have no say. I think that that's just totally wrong. I think most people would feel extremely violated by that. I would bet that people would compare that to something as extreme as rape, because that is essentially what forcing somebody to put something in their body that they don't want is. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So I believe anybody should have choice over that nobody should choose that. I also believe that your actions should not harm others. So this is, like I said, a complex topic. So with that being said, I think that private entities, whether it's a company, a person, a home, whoever, if they feel that somebody not having a vaccine is a threat to them and their health, that they should be able to say, you cannot come on my property because I am afraid of the health concerns. Now, here's the thing. Is that a legitimate fear or not? It may very well be. It may not be. Every person's different. You don't know if that person is immune or not. Your only real scientific way to have an idea today is proof of a vaccine. You don't know any other way if somebody could even be immune from something. So I would say that people should be well within their rights to say, I don't think that's right for me. I don't want this vaccine. But I would say an organization like, say, Walmart would also be within their rights to say, well, if you don't have a vaccine, we don't want you on our private property.
Yeah, it's a complex thing, because what about public accommodations?
Well, and
you're in
and
everything from public libraries to public transportation to the gathering places, churches. You're commingling people who may be infected with some communicable disease with perfectly healthy people. It's a tough call.
I agree. And that's actually the next part of the discussion is, how do we handle public space? Because your body, your choice for putting something in it, that's pretty straightforward to me. Your private property and who you allow on your private property, that's really straightforward to me too. The issue becomes public property. And in the case of this law, I was originally thinking it was just public schools. It looks like private schools too. I don't think the government has the right to tell the private schools who they can and cannot admit into their schools. So I definitely think that that's an overreach, especially religious private schools. They're no longer allowed to offer a religious exemption. So I see an issue there. But how do we handle the public health concern? And the only thing that I can think of is, I always talk about transparency and how important transparency is. So if we as a community came up with a way for people to say, I don't have these vaccines, and you then being able to opt out of being there by leaving, or something like that. I don't know how it would work, but that's the only way that I think it's fair and true to anybody, because you might be exposed to something without ever consenting to it. And that's another issue, but do you want to tell people, oh, you can't be in public anymore because you made a choice with your body? I don't think that's right either.
And further muddying the waters, you're going to have government parachuting in here saying, well, we have an overriding government interest in maintaining public health. Mm-hmm. So we're going to mandate this and that, and we're going to forbid that.
Yep.
It keeps getting murkier and murkier.
Yeah, no, it does. And so one of the things I tried to look for is what happens in like Amish and Mennonite communities, because
they don't vaccinate.
Yeah, so a lot of them don't, but interestingly enough, I was reading some articles, and because a lot of them don't, there's not a lot of information. There's not a lot of statistics, which makes it really hard to know and understand, is it effective for them? Is it not? Like, how do they handle it? I actually found some blogs from some doctors who have been vaccinating Amish and Mennonite communities, and they've essentially, it depends on their I forgot what their religious leader's name is. It's kind of like a bishop or something like that. Yeah, that basically makes decisions. And what they were saying is, if they go in there and they educate people and their religious leader feels comfortable with it, they will actually allow their community to become vaccinated. So that was kind of an interesting thing
on a community basis.
Yeah. So it's actually a community, community by community basis. And I didn't read this, but I kind of feel like they would probably allow people to choose to opt out still. But really, what I was looking for is the impact of these diseases on their communities, and has it really impacted them and affected them to the level that we think it would in public society or not. And I unfortunately couldn't find any information on that. So if any of you do have that sort of information, I would love for you to pass it on. I would love to follow up with the topic to discuss it more. And if you guys have ideas, like how could we make this work where people can still opt out? Because here's the thing. I don't think having a religious option is enough. I think that you should be able to just say, I don't want that in my body. But I think that you need to be upfront with the people you come into contact with, and also, allow them to consent to potentially being exposed to that. I think there's definitely an issue here. So I think we need to come together, figure out a solution to that problem. I know some people are on one side are like, yeah, the solution's easy. Just vaccinate everybody. I don't think that's right if they don't consent to it. And I think other people just think, it's fine, it's private, it's your own personal business, nobody else should know. And for most things, I would subscribe to that. But for something in terms of potentially being exposed to something that, I feel like you should be able to consent to that too. So there we are. That's my conflicting argument with myself on vaccines and where I stand on them. But I am totally against the government being able to tell you that you have to put something in your body. I totally believe you should have choice in that. But I also believe you need to be respectful to those who could be afraid of that, and fear that that's a health issue for them. So there you guys have it. That is that's the discussion on. There's now 123 comments in here. Let me see if I can pull one out right before the end of the show. Oh no, there's too much in here, guys. What, there's like paragraphs in here and people like fighting back and forth. So guys, what I'm gonna do, I will read through the comments. Hopefully between now and the next show, if there's enough there to address, I will bring it up on Friday's show. If there's not, I really am gonna try to find some numbers for you from the Amish communities, and also possibly find some state-by-state schedule comparisons, because I think it would be really interesting to see what New York requires versus what other states require. And at least according to this bill, it doesn't look like New York State requires all the vaccines that the doctors push for, because I know, like, there's vaccines I got that aren't on the list whatsoever. So Good to know there. Guys, we're going to wrap up the show. Another episode of Radio Free New York. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for all the comments. I will read through them and try to respond to them later today. I will catch you guys on Friday on Radio Free New York.